The rain fell hard on the metal roof of Hansung Junkyard, creating a constant drumming noise that echoed across the piles of broken machinery and twisted metal. Tae-sung pulled his coat tighter around his shoulders as he walked through the muddy paths between mountains of scrap. At 68 years old, his joints ached in weather like this, but he needed parts for his old ground vehicle. The engine was making strange noises again, and he refused to buy a new one when the old could be fixed. Tae-sung had been coming to this junkyard for 5 years now, ever since he retired from the Earth Defense Force and moved to the countryside outside New Busan. The owner, a greedy man named Dako, knew him by sight, but they never talked much. Tae-sung preferred it that way. He had spent 20 years after the war trying to forget, trying to find peace in silence and solitude. The Zentari War had ended 2 decades ago, but its scars remained everywhere. Half the junkyard was filled with wreckage from alien ships, broken weapons, and damaged technology that nobody quite knew how to repair or recycle properly. Most people avoided that section. The twisted metal and strange materials reminded them of the invasion, of the millions who died, of the terror that came from the stars. Tae-sung walked past the civilian section and headed toward the restricted area where the alien wreckage was kept. Dako had mentioned last week that some old Earth military vehicles had been dumped there by mistake. If Tae-sung was lucky, he might find the power converter he needed. The restricted section was surrounded by a weak electric fence with warning signs. Tae-sung knew the code to the gate. Dako had given it to him years ago after Tae-sung had helped him identify some valuable military equipment. As a former colonel, Tae-sung still remembered the technical specifications of most Earth Defense Force vehicles. Inside the restricted area, the atmosphere felt different. The alien metal had strange colors, blues and purples that seemed wrong somehow. Some pieces still hummed with residual energy. Tae-sung walked carefully, his military training making him alert despite the years of retirement. He was searching through a pile of old engine parts when he heard it. A low sound, almost like a growl, but deeper, more resonant. It vibrated in his chest. Tae-sung froze. His hand instinctively went to his hip where he used to carry his service weapon, but he had stopped carrying it years ago. The sound came again, weaker this time. It was coming from behind a massive pile of black metal that looked like parts of a Zentari battlecruiser. Tae-sung moved slowly, his boots squelching in the mud. As he rounded the pile, he stopped breathing. There, chained to a support beam with heavy electromagnetic restraints, was a creature he had only seen in nightmares and military briefings. A Valkyrie. An alien black panther, but massive, easily the size of an earth tiger. Its fur was so black it seemed to absorb the gray light of the rainy day. But it was the scars that made Tae-sung's stomach turn. The creature's body was covered in wounds, old and new. Burn marks from plasma weapons crossed its shoulders and back. Deep gashes that looked like they came from combat blades ran along its flanks. Around its neck were the faded marks of slave collars burned into the skin. One of its eyes was milky white and clearly blind. Its left ear was torn nearly in half. The panther was lying on its side in the mud, breathing shallowly, ribs showing through its magnificent coat. Tae-sung had fought against Valkyrie during the war. They had been in the front lines of every major battle, leading the Zentari ground forces with terrifying efficiency. He remembered watching them tear through defensive positions, unstoppable and merciless. But this creature looked nothing like those warriors. This one looked broken, defeated, waiting to die. The panther's one good eye opened and focused on him. It was a golden amber color, and in that eye Tae-sung saw something he recognized. He saw exhaustion. He saw the kind of weariness that comes from seeing too much violence, from living too long with pain. He saw himself reflected back. "What are you doing back here?" Dako's voice made Tae-sung jump. The junkyard owner had followed him, probably worried that Tae-sung might steal something valuable. Dako saw where Tae-sung was looking and laughed, a harsh sound. "Oh, you found my prize. Beautiful, isn't she?" "Well, she was beautiful before the war ruined her." "What is she doing here?" Tae-sung asked quietly. Dako shrugged. "Bought her from a salvage crew that found her in a wrecked Zentari slave ship. Thought I could sell her to the fighting rings, you know? People pay good money to watch alien creatures fight. But she's too broken. Won't fight anymore. Just lies there. Been trying to sell her for 3 months, but nobody wants a Valkyrie that won't perform. Planning to have her put down tomorrow. Costs too much to feed her." Tae-sung looked back at the panther. She was still watching him, not moving, not growling now. Just watching with that tired, knowing eye. "How much?" Tae-sung heard himself ask. Dak-ho's eyes lit up with greed. You want to buy her? Are you crazy, old man? These things killed thousands of our people during the war. How much? Tae-sung repeated. Dak-ho named a price that was almost all of Tae-sung's savings. It was ridiculous, criminal even. But Tae-sung found himself nodding. I'll transfer the money now. And I want the documentation that allows me to transport her legally. 20 minutes later, after the transaction was complete and Dak-ho had greedily counted his money 3 times, Tae-sung stood alone with the Panther. The rain had lightened to a drizzle. He had his vehicle backed up as close as he could get it, but he still needed to release her from the restraints. His hands shook slightly as he approached. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous. Velakari were apex predators, trained warriors. Even injured and half-starved, she could kill him in seconds. But Tae-sung had made his decision. He knelt in the mud beside her. I'm going to release these restraints, he said quietly, not sure if she could understand human speech. I have a place where you can rest. I'm not going to hurt you. He reached for the electromagnetic lock. The Panther tensed and a low growl rumbled in her chest. Tae-sung paused, his hand hovering over the control. Their eyes met again, human and alien, separated by species and history but connected by something deeper. I know. Tae-sung whispered. I know what it's like to be tired of fighting. I know what it's like to just want it all to end. But not today. Not like this. He pressed the release button. The restraints hummed and then opened with a click. The Panther could move freely now. She could attack him. She could run. But she did neither. She remained lying in the mud, watching him, breathing heavily. Tae-sung slowly stood and walked to his vehicle. He opened the back cargo area and laid down some old blankets. Then he stepped back and waited. For a long moment, nothing happened. The rain fell softly around them. Then slowly, painfully, the Panther rose to her feet. She was larger standing up, and Tae-sung felt a flutter of fear. But she didn't approach aggressively. Instead, she limped toward the vehicle, her movements careful and deliberate. When she reached the cargo area, she paused and looked at Tae-sung one more time. He nodded. The Panther climbed into the vehicle and collapsed on the blankets, exhausted from even that small effort. As Tae-sung drove away from Hansung Junkyard, he glanced in his mirror at the massive black shape lying in the back of his vehicle. He had no idea what he was doing. He had no plan. All he knew was that he had looked into the eyes of another old soldier and couldn't walk away. The rain continued to fall as they drove toward his compound, 2 veterans heading into an uncertain future together. The first 3 days were the hardest. Tae-sung had converted his garage workshop into a recovery space, clearing out his tools and projects to make room. He had laid down more blankets in the corner, set up a water bowl large enough for the Panther, and arranged a heating unit because the nights were getting cold. The Panther, whom Tae-sung had started calling Nari in his mind, had not moved from where she first collapsed. She lay in the corner with her back against the wall, her one good eye tracking every movement Tae-sung made. She had not eaten. She had not drunk water. She simply watched and waited. Tae-sung went about his daily routine as if having a massive alien predator in his garage was completely normal. He worked on his small projects at his bench, talking quietly as he repaired old electronics and machinery. He told her about the weather, about the birds he saw that morning, about nothing important. He never approached her directly. He never tried to touch her. Every few hours he would prepare food. The local market had been shocked when he requested raw meat suitable for carnivorous alien species. It was expensive, imported from off-world sources, but Tae-sung bought it anyway. He would place the meat on a metal tray and slide it within her reach, then return to his work without watching to see if she ate. On the first day, the meat remained untouched. On the second day, the same. Tae-sung began to worry. If she didn't eat soon, she would die. But he couldn't force her. He had to let her make the choice. On the third day, he fell asleep at his workbench. The nightmares had been worse lately. In his dreams, he was back at the Battle of Ganymede Station, watching his unit die around him, hearing the screams, smelling the burning metal and flesh. He jerked awake with a gasp, his heart pounding, sweat on his forehead despite the cool air. As his breathing slowed, he became aware that something was different. He turned slowly in his chair. Nari had moved. She was no longer pressed against the far wall. She was lying on the garage floor about 2 meters away from him, her massive head resting on her paws, watching him with that single amber eye. The meat from earlier was gone. The water bowl had been used. She had eaten and drunk while he slept. Tae-sung felt relief wash over him. It was a small victory, but an important one. "Good morning, Nari," he said softly. The name had come to him one night, and it felt right somehow. It was a simple name, easy to say. Nari blinked slowly at him but didn't move. Tae-sung stood carefully and went to prepare breakfast for both of them. He had learned during the war to eat simple meals, and his habits had not changed. Rice, soup, some vegetables. He prepared Nari's meal too, fresh meat on the tray. As the days passed, a pattern developed. Nari would eat when Tae-sung was not looking directly at her. She would drink water in the early morning before he came to the garage. She had moved her resting spot closer to where he worked, close enough that he could hear her breathing. A week after bringing her home, Tae-sung noticed details about her injuries that he had missed in the junkyard. The plasma burns were infected, the skin around them red and swollen. She had a broken fang that must have caused constant pain. Her ribs showed clearly through her coat, evidence of long-term starvation. The scars from the slave collars went deep, and around her neck the fur had never grown back properly. He knew he needed help. Medical help. But that meant bringing someone else into this situation. After thinking for a day, he made a call to an old friend. Hyun-woo had served with him during the war. After retiring, Hyun-woo had become a veterinarian specializing in exotic alien species. If anyone could help Nari, it was him. But Tae-sung also knew that Hyun-woo had lost his brother at the Battle of New Busan, killed by Velakari ground forces. When Hyun-woo arrived 2 days later, his reaction was exactly what Tae-sung expected. He stood frozen in the doorway of the garage, staring at Nari with wide eyes. His face went pale, then red with anger. "Are you insane?" Hyun-woo's voice was tight with emotion. "Do you know what that is? That's a Velakari. They were allied with the Zentari. They led the ground assaults. They killed thousands of our people. They killed my brother." Tae-sung stood between Hyun-woo and Nari. "She's a prisoner of war who was enslaved and tortured." "The war is over, Hyun-woo." "The war is never over for people like us," Hyun-woo shot back. "How can you have that thing in your home?" "Because when I look at her, I don't see an enemy," Tae-sung said quietly. "I see a soldier who suffered. Just like we did. Just like your brother did. Look at her, Hyun-woo. Really look." Hyun-woo's jaw clenched, but he forced himself to study Nari. The massive Panther had not moved during the confrontation. She lay still, watching them both, but there was no aggression in her posture, just wariness and exhaustion. Hyun-woo saw the scars, the burns, the broken body. His anger faltered. As a veterinarian, he had seen abused animals before. He recognized the signs of long-term torture and neglect. "She needs medical treatment," he finally said, his voice rough. "Those infections could kill her, and I need to scan her to see what internal damage there is." Over the next hour, Hyun-woo carefully approached Nari with his medical equipment. Tae-sung stayed close, providing a sense of safety. Remarkably, Nari allowed the examination. She tensed when Hyun-woo touched her injuries, but she didn't snap or growl. It was as if she understood they were trying to help. The medical scanner revealed information that shocked them both. Nari was approximately 340 years old, ancient for a Velakari. But more disturbing was the neural implant embedded in her skull. It was Zentari technology, used for slave control. The implant was deactivated now, but it was still there. Foreign technology melded with her nervous system. "This is a slave control device," Hyun-woo said, his anger returning but directed differently now. "They put this in her brain. She wasn't fighting for the Zentari by choice. She was being controlled." Tae-sung felt something cold settle in his stomach. All this time he had assumed the Velakari had been allies of the Zentari. But if they were slaves controlled by neural implants, then everything was different. They had not been enemies. They had been victims, forced to fight against their will. "Can you remove it?" Tae-sung asked. Hyun-woo shook his head. "Not without killing her. It's too integrated. And she's too weak right now. Maybe after she heals, maybe with better equipment and a specialist, but not now." They began treatment that day. Antibiotics for the infections. Pain medication. Careful cleaning of her wounds. Hyun-woo came every day for 2 weeks, and slowly, grudgingly, he began to see Nari not as a symbol of his brother's death, but as an individual who had suffered her own losses. Nari grew stronger. Her coat began to shine with health as proper nutrition and care took effect. The infections cleared. She started moving around the garage, exploring carefully. And most significantly, she started following Tae-sung. When he walked to the house, she would move to the garage door and watch until he returned. When he sat to read in the evening, she would lie nearby. She never invaded his space, but she was always present, a silent guardian. One evening, about a month after he had brought her home, Tae-sung was sitting in his chair reading an old book about the war. He was tired, emotionally drained from reading about battles he had fought in, about friends he had lost. He felt the weight of memory pressing down on him. Nari approached slowly. Tae-sung looked up, wondering what she needed. Without warning, she moved close and laid her massive head on his lap. The weight was considerable, but the gesture was unmistakable. She was offering comfort, seeking connection. Tae-sung's hand trembled as he reached down and placed it on her scarred head. Her fur was softer than he expected, thick and warm. He could feel the old injuries under his fingers, the places where plasma had burned, where blades had cut, where collars had crushed. "We're going to be okay," he whispered, not sure if he was reassuring her or himself. "Both of us. We're going to be okay." Nari made a sound he had never heard before, a low rumble that was almost like a purr but deeper, more resonant. It vibrated through his hand, through his body. And for the first time since the war ended, Tae-sung felt something like peace. They sat together in comfortable silence as the evening turned to night, two old soldiers finding healing in unexpected companionship. 2 months had passed since Tae-sung brought Nari home. Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Nari was healthy now, her coat gleaming, her movements strong and graceful again. She had the run of the compound, though she preferred to stay close to Tae-sung. They had developed a deep understanding that needed no words. A glance, a gesture, a presence was enough. But one night everything changed. Tae-sung woke suddenly at 3 a.m. Something was wrong. He heard sounds from the garage, distressed vocalizations he had never heard Nari make before. He grabbed his robe and rushed outside, his heart pounding. Nari was pacing back and forth in the garage, her movements agitated. Her tail lashed side to side. She was making sounds that were almost like crying, high-pitched and desperate. When she saw Tae-sung, she moved toward him urgently. "What's wrong?" Tae-sung asked, approaching carefully. "Nari, what is it?" She pressed against him, her massive body trembling. Tae-sung placed his hand on her head, trying to comfort her. The moment his skin touched her fur, the world exploded. Pain shot through his skull. Light flared behind his eyes. Tae-sung gasped and would have fallen, but he felt Nari supporting his weight. Then suddenly he was no longer in his garage. He was somewhere else, someone else, seeing through different eyes. The neural implant in Nari's head had activated somehow, creating a bridge between their minds, and through that bridge, Tae-sung saw her memories. He saw a world of purple skies and silver towers, Phallic Prime, beautiful, advanced, peaceful. He saw Nari, but she was different. Younger, unscarred, wearing flowing robes and standing in a great observatory. She was studying star maps, tracking the movements of distant galaxies. She was a scholar, a scientist. Her full name echoed in his mind, Velika Torva, she who maps the stars between. The memory shifted. The sky turned dark. Ships descended, massive and terrible. The Zentari had come. Tae-sung felt Nari's confusion, her fear. The Velikari people tried to resist, but the Zentari had weapons beyond imagination. They released a plague, a genetic virus designed specifically for Velikari biology. Tae-sung watched through Nari's eyes as her people began to die. Slowly, painfully, over weeks and months. The children suffered most. The Zentari offered a choice: serve as soldiers in their empire and receive the cure. Refuse and watch your species go extinct. It was no choice at all. Tae-sung felt Nari's despair as she joined the first wave of volunteers. Tens of thousands of Velikari made the same choice, believing they could save their homeworld through service. But it was a lie. It had always been a lie. The neural implants were installed. Tae-sung felt the horror of the procedure, the invasion of foreign technology into Nari's mind. The implant did not take away her consciousness. That was the cruelty of it. She remained fully aware, fully herself, but her body no longer obeyed her will. The Zentari controlled her actions while leaving her mind intact to witness every atrocity. The memories came faster now, centuries compressing into moments. Taesung saw battle after battle. Nari fought in 147 planetary invasions. Each time she tried to resist. Each time the implant forced her forward, she watched civilizations fall. She killed soldiers who were just defending their homes, just like the Velakari had tried to defend theirs. The plague never stopped. Velak Prime died slowly in orbit above them while Nari and her people were forced to conquer other worlds. The Zentari had never intended to provide a cure. They wanted perfect soldiers who could never disobey, could never refuse, could never escape. The memories shifted to a battle Taesung recognized. Ganymede Station, the first major battle of the Earth invasion. Taesung felt himself recoil as he saw the assault through Nari's eyes. She had been there. She had killed 43 human soldiers, their faces clear in her memory. She remembered each one because she could not forget. The implant made her kill them, but her mind recorded every detail, every face twisted in pain, every final breath. Taesung felt her agony. She had not wanted to kill them. She had fought against the implant with everything she had, but it was not enough. Never enough. Then the memory shifted to New Busan. Taesung's breath caught. This was his battle. He had been there, leading an evacuation convoy, trying to get civilians and wounded soldiers to safety. The memory showed Nari's unit being ordered to attack the evacuation routes, to eliminate the refugees. The implant forced her toward a specific location, a canyon pass where Taesung's convoy was supposed to be. But something happened. The human forces were using electromagnetic pulse weapons, desperate attempts to disable Zentari technology. The pulses were disrupting the control network, creating brief moments where the implants glitched. In one of those moments, Nari regained control of herself. It lasted only seconds, but she used those seconds to roar, to make sounds that warned the approaching humans. She positioned herself in a way that seemed threatening, driving the convoy to change their route, to avoid the ambush that had been set. The memory showed the human convoy altering course, escaping the trap. 200 soldiers and civilians lived because of that warning. Then the implant reasserted control and pain ripped through Nari's body as punishment for her resistance. But she had done it. She had saved them. She had saved Taesung. The memory of the war's end came next. Humanity turning the tide, using tactics and determination that surprised everyone. The final battle above Earth's orbit. The Zentari fleet breaking and retreating, and then abandonment. The Zentari left their slave soldiers behind. Thousands of Velakari, still implanted, still enslaved, were abandoned on battlefields across the galaxy. When the control network was destroyed, they were free but traumatized beyond measure. Most could not cope with the sudden return of will after centuries of control. Nari drifted for 20 years. She could not return to Velak Prime because it no longer existed. Her people were scattered, dying, enslaved, or dead. She was captured eventually by scavengers who sold her to fighting rings, to collectors, to anyone who would pay. She had given up. She was waiting to die when Taesung found her. The connection broke suddenly and Taesung collapsed to his knees, gasping. Tears were streaming down his face. His hands shook. Nari was beside him, pressing against him, making soft sounds of distress. "You saved me," Taesung whispered, his voice breaking. 20 years ago, you saved my convoy. You saved my life." He reached for his old military records kept in a box in his house. His hands shook as he pulled out the battle reports from New Busan. There it was, documented. 8:47 hours. Unexplained alien vocalizations detected approaching grid reference 47 Delta. Convoy altered route per safety protocol. Original route destroyed by orbital strike 0903 hours. Estimated 200 personnel saved by route change. He had never known. None of them had known. They had thought it was luck, or coincidence, or just good training that made them change course. But it was her. Nari had fought against her own enslavement, had endured torture and punishment to save them. Taesung looked at Nari with new eyes. She was not just a survivor. She was a hero who had never stopped fighting, even when fighting meant resisting her own body. For 3 centuries she had been forced to be a weapon. But in the moments when she could reclaim herself, she had chosen mercy. "I'm sorry," Taesung said, pulling her close, pressing his face against her scarred neck. "I'm so sorry for what they did to you. I'm sorry your people suffered. I'm sorry no one knew. But I know now. And I swear I will make sure the galaxy knows. You were never a monster. You were a victim who never stopped being a person inside. Nari made that deep rumbling sound, the one that meant contentment and sadness mixed together. She had carried these memories alone for so long. Now someone else knew. Someone else understood. For the first time in 340 years, she was not alone with her pain. They stayed together on the garage floor as dawn slowly broke outside. Two old soldiers, their stories finally shared, their bond deeper than either had imagined possible. The weight of history lay heavy on them both, but it was a weight they could now carry together. 3 months after the night when their minds connected, life had changed in ways Tae-sung had not expected. The bond between him and Nari had grown stronger. They understood each other completely now. Nari had learned to trust, to relax, to find joy in simple things like lying in the sun or playing with the wild birds that visited the compound. But their peace was not to last. The visitor arrived on a Tuesday morning. Tae-sung was working in his garden when he heard a vehicle approaching. Nari, who had been dozing nearby, lifted her head and growled softly. She had excellent instincts for danger. A woman stepped out of an official-looking transport. She was young, maybe 30, dressed in the uniform of some galactic organization. She smiled as she approached, but her eyes were cautious, especially when she saw Nari. "Mr. Tae-sung," she asked politely. "My name is Ji-woo. I'm a representative from the Galactic Refugee Rehabilitation Commission. May I speak with you?" Tae-sung wiped dirt from his hands and stood. "What is this about?" Ji-woo glanced at Nari, who had moved to stand beside Tae-sung. "It's about her. About Velakesh Torva, if I have the pronunciation correct. We've been searching for Velakari survivors for 5 years now. We tracked her through the illegal transaction records from Hansung Junkyard. We want to help." They sat on Tae-sung's porch, Nari lying at his feet. Ji-woo explained that the Galactic Refugee Rehabilitation Commission was a multi-species organization created after the war. Their mission was to find and help former slave soldiers from all the species the Zentari had controlled. "There are fewer than 400 Velakari left in known space," Ji-woo said sadly. "Most died during the war or after, when they couldn't cope with freedom. We've been trying to find them all to offer help, therapy, and a chance to rebuild their lives." She activated a holographic display showing other Velakari. Tae-sung watched Nari's reaction carefully. Nari's ears perked forward, her eye focused intently on the images of her own kind. It was the first time she had seen another Velakari in decades. "We've established a sanctuary on Kepler 442b, Ji-woo continued. "A place where Velakari can live together, rebuild their culture, heal together. We would like to offer Nari a place there." Tae-sung felt his heart sink. Of course Nari should be with her own kind. Of course she deserved to be part of a community that understood her experiences. But the thought of losing her made him feel hollow inside. That night he watched Nari carefully. She seemed thoughtful, occasionally looking at the stars visible through the window. Tae-sung wondered if she was thinking about the sanctuary, about others like her. "You should go," he said quietly, though the words hurt. "You should be with your people. You've spent too long alone." Nari looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood, walked over, and placed her head on his lap. The message was clear. This was her home. He was her family. She had made her choice. When Ji-woo returned 3 days later for an answer, Tae-sung told her that Nari wanted to stay. Ji-woo accepted this gracefully, but her expression was worried. "I understand," she said, "and I'm glad she found someone who cares for her. But Mr. Tae-sung, you need to be careful. The war may be over officially, but not everyone has forgiven. There are groups, human supremacist organizations, who want all former enemy combatants eliminated. They don't care that the Velakari were slaves. They only remember the deaths." "Are you saying we're in danger?" Tae-sung asked. "I'm saying be vigilant. The galaxy knows where she is now. Not everyone will be as understanding as you." Ji-woo was right to warn them. 3 days after her departure, Tae-sung's old military instincts began to whisper danger. Small things were wrong. Fresh tire tracks in the forest road that shouldn't be there. Birds going silent at odd times. The feeling of being watched. He activated the security systems he had installed years ago, military-grade equipment he had never fully deactivated after retiring. The thermal scanners showed multiple heat signatures in the forest surrounding his compound. Someone was watching them. Multiple someones. Nari sensed it too. She became restless, pacing the compound perimeter, her body tense and alert. Tae-sung prepared for the worst. He checked his old service weapon, made sure the compound's defenses were operational, and sent a message to Hyunwoo telling him to stay away for a few days. The attack came at midnight. 15 men in tactical gear rushed the compound from 3 directions. They had military training and good equipment. Their leader was a man Tae-sung recognized from old war footage, Kang-di, a former Earth Defense Force soldier who had become infamous after the war for his extremist views. "Come out, traitor," Kang-di's voice boomed through loudspeakers. "Send out the alien and we'll let you live. Harbor it and you die together." Tae-sung activated the compound's defense grid. Automated turrets rose from concealed positions. Shield barriers flickered to life. Electromagnetic pulse mines activated around the perimeter. The compound had been designed by a paranoid old colonel who never quite trusted that the war was truly over. But 15 trained killers with military weapons were too many. The defenses would slow them down but not stop them. "Stay close," Tae-sung told Nari. "We fight together." The battle began with an explosion as the attackers breached the outer wall. Tae-sung's turrets opened fire, forcing them to take cover. But these men knew how to handle automated defenses. They advanced using proper military tactics, covering each other, taking out the turrets one by one. Tae-sung positioned himself at a defensive choke point, his weapon ready. He was old, but his training was still good. He took down 2 attackers who tried to rush through the garden area. But then his weapon overheated and he was exposed. That was when Nari showed what she truly was. The massive Black Panther moved like liquid shadow. One moment she was beside Tae-sung, the next she was among the attackers. But she was not the mindless killer they expected. She was a veteran of 3 centuries of warfare, and now she fought with purpose and control. She disarmed one man without seriously injuring him, her jaws clamping on his weapon and yanking it away. She knocked another unconscious with a precise strike of her paw. She used the terrain to her advantage, appearing and disappearing in the darkness, her black coat making her nearly invisible. Tae-sung watched in awe. Nari was holding back. She could have killed all of them easily, but she was choosing not to. Even after everything she had suffered, even facing people who wanted her dead, she chose mercy. Together they pushed the attackers back. Tae-sung's tactical mind coordinated with Nari's warrior instincts. They worked as a perfect unit, each covering the other's weaknesses, communicating without words. But then Kang-di appeared with a plasma rifle. He had circled around during the chaos and now had a clear shot at Tae-sung. "You're a disgrace," Kang-di snarled. "I was at Ganymede Station. I watched these things slaughter our people. And you keep one as a pet?" "She was enslaved," Tae-sung shouted back. "She had no choice. The Velikari were victims too. Lies." Kang-di raised his rifle, aiming at Tae-sung's chest. Nari moved faster than thought itself. She leaped between them, taking the plasma shot meant for Tae-sung. The weapon's blast caught her in the shoulder, burning through fur and flesh. Nari roared, not in aggression but in pain and sorrow, a sound that echoed across the compound. Tae-sung felt rage unlike anything he had experienced since the war. He rushed forward, years of age falling away as training took over. He disarmed Kang-di with a move he had learned 40 years ago and pinned him to the ground. "She saved my life during the war," Tae-sung shouted. "She fought her own programming to warn my convoy. She could kill you all right now, but she won't because she's choosing to be better than her pain." Sirens wailed in the distance. Hyunwoo had called security forces when he received Tae-sung's warning message. The remaining attackers began to retreat, not wanting to face official authorities. Kang-di, lying pinned beneath Tae-sung, stared at Nari. The massive Panther was bleeding from her shoulder wound but had not attacked him. Despite being shot, despite having every reason to tear him apart, she simply stood there watching him with that single amber eye. Something broke in Kang-di's expression. He saw for the first time what Tae-sung had seen months ago. Not a monster but a person, not an enemy but a victim who had survived. The security forces arrived and arrested the attackers. Hyunwoo came right behind them, his medical equipment ready. As he treated Nari's wound, Tae-sung sat beside her, his hand on her head. "You didn't have to protect me," he said softly. Nari made that deep rumbling sound. "But of course she did. That's what family does." 6 months after the attack on his compound, Tae-sung stood in a place he never imagined he would be. Luna Station, the massive orbital facility that served as the meeting place for the Galactic Justice Council. Representatives from 47 different species filled the observation galleries, all watching the floor below where Tai-Sung stood beside Nari Jiwoo had spent months organizing this. After the attack made galactic news, she had approached Tai-Sung with an idea. If the galaxy was going to truly understand what happened to the Velikari and other enslaved species, someone needed to testify. Someone needed to tell the truth. Nari had agreed to speak. The translation device hung around her neck, a sophisticated piece of technology that would convert her vocalizations into words that all species could understand. But more than technology, she had Tai-Sung beside her. His presence gave her strength. The chamber was filled with tension. Many species represented here had lost people to Velikari warriors during the Zentari invasions. Forgiveness did not come easily, especially when the wounds were still fresh. The chief counselor, a being from a species Tai-Sung did not recognize, called the session to order. Velikesh Nari Torva, you have requested to address this council. You may begin. Nari's voice, translated through the device, filled the chamber. She spoke of Velak Prime, of the world she had loved. She described being a scholar, studying the stars, living peacefully. Then she spoke of the Zentari arrival, of the plague, of the impossible choice her people faced. She did not spare herself. She told them about the neural implants, about being conscious while her body committed atrocities she could not prevent. She named the battles she fought in, the world she helped conquer, the lives she took. Her voice broke several times, but she continued. For 340 years, Nari said through the translator, I was a prisoner in my own body. I watched my world die. I watched my people scattered and enslaved. I killed soldiers who were only defending their homes just as we tried to defend ours. I cannot undo what was done. I cannot bring back the dead. But I can tell you the truth. The Velikari were not your enemies. We were weapons, forced into service against our will. She spoke of the other species enslaved the same way. The Tilvari, whose wings were clipped so they could only fight on the ground. The Merendi, whose peaceful nature was overwritten by control implants. The Colossi, who were pacifists before the Zentari found them. For 3 hours, Nari testified. She provided names of Zentari commanders, locations of possible survivors still enslaved, details of the control technology. She held nothing back. When she finished, the chamber was silent. Then a representative from the Tilvari species, the bird-like people whose wings had been clipped, stood. Tai-Sung tensed, unsure what would happen. I lost my mate to a Velikari warrior during the Battle of Kepler Station, the Tilvari said, his voice heavy with old pain. For 20 years I have hated your kind. But today I understand. You were not our enemy. We were all victims of the same evil. More representatives stood one by one, some angry, some sad, some simply acknowledging the truth they heard. Then the hardest question came from a human representative. How can we trust that you would not do the same again if given the opportunity? What proof do we have that you have truly changed? Nari looked at Tai-Sung. He nodded encouragingly. She turned back to the assembly and did something that surprised everyone. She approached Tai-Sung and lowered her head, pressing it against his chest in a gesture of complete trust and vulnerability. I choose healing over hatred, her translated voice said. I choose this human who saw me as a person when everyone else saw a monster. I could have killed the men who attacked us. I could have taken revenge for 3 centuries of suffering. But I chose mercy instead. That is my proof. That is my answer. The chamber erupted in discussion. Species representatives argued, debated, some shouting in anger, others calling for understanding. Finally, after hours of deliberation, the Galactic Justice Council reached a decision. All former Zentari slave soldiers would be formally recognized as victims of war crimes rather than war criminals themselves. A galaxy-wide effort would begin to locate and rehabilitate survivors. Species like the Velikari would be granted protected status, and most importantly, the Council would actively pursue justice against the remaining Zentari leadership. It was not perfect. Some species voted against the measures. Some humans protested outside Luna Station. But it was a beginning. When Tai-Sung and Nari returned to Earth, they found something waiting for them. Jiwoo had organized a surprise. Several Velikari survivors, inspired by Nari's courage, had expressed interest in coming to Earth. They needed a place to heal, guided by someone who understood their trauma. How many? Tai-Sung asked, looking at his compound. 7 to start, Jiwoo said. More if this works. They need you, Taesung, both of you. You understand what they've been through. You can help them heal. Taesung looked at Nari. She met his gaze steadily. After a moment, she made the deep rumbling sound that meant yes, agreement, understanding. We'll need more space, Taesung said. And help. Yunwoo stepped forward. I'll stay full-time as medical director. My brother would have wanted me to help heal rather than hate. Other volunteers came forward. Former soldiers who understood trauma, civilians who wanted to help. Even Kang Dae, released from prison after cooperating with authorities and serving reduced time, arrived asking if he could help with construction. Over the next 3 months, Taesung's compound transformed into a proper rehabilitation center. New buildings were constructed. Medical facilities were installed. Gardens were planted for meditation and healing. The property expanded to accommodate the needs of traumatized warriors learning to be individuals again. When the first 7 Velikari arrived, Nari greeted each one personally. She touched heads with them in a traditional greeting that had not been performed in centuries. Some were old like her. Others were younger, taken by the Zentari as children. All carried similar scars, visible and invisible. Among them was Velikesh Toru, a young male who had been only 80 years old when enslaved. He had known nothing but war his entire life. There was also Keshanara, an elder female who had fought beside Nari in the early campaigns 300 years ago. They had not seen each other since before the Battle of Ganymede. The compound became a place of healing. Humans and Velikari worked together, learning from each other. Veterans helped veterans, the barriers of species falling away in the face of shared understanding. Nari emerged as a natural leader, but one who led through compassion rather than command. The success of the Earth Velikari Sanctuary attracted attention across the galaxy. Other species began establishing similar programs. The Tilvari created a wing healing center. The Merendi founded a community for reconnecting with their peaceful traditions. The Colossi established meditation sanctuaries. Humanity became known across the galaxy for something beyond military strength. They became known for their capacity to forgive, to understand that healing requires seeing past revenge to find redemption. One evening, a year after everything began, Taesung sat on his porch watching the sunset. Nari lay beside him as always, her head resting on his lap. Around the compound, other Velikari moved peacefully. Some were tending gardens. Others practiced meditation exercises. A few were playing a traditional Velikari game that was being taught to human volunteers. Kang Dae approached carrying building plans. We're ready to start the new housing unit tomorrow. Should be finished in 2 weeks. Good, Taesung said. Jiwoo says 3 more survivors want to come. Kang Dae nodded and left. It was still awkward between them sometimes, but they were working toward understanding. Hyunwoo joined Taesung on the porch, holding 2 cups of tea. He handed one to Taesung and sat down. I've been thinking about my brother a lot lately, he said quietly. I used to think honoring his memory meant hating what killed him. But I was wrong. He died defending people. The best way to honor him is to help protect people who need protection, even former enemies. Especially former enemies, Taesung corrected gently. They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the compound's lights came on against the growing darkness. The sanctuary glowed with warm light and the sounds of different species coexisting peacefully. Jiwoo's transport arrived with news. The Galactic Council wants to use this facility as the model for rehabilitation programs across known space. They're asking if you would be willing to train others in your methods. Taesung looked at Nari. She was watching the other Velikari with contentment in her golden eye. She had spent 340 years being forced to destroy. Now she was helping rebuild. Not just her own kind, but the bridges between all species who had suffered under Zentari cruelty. We'll help, Taesung said. Whatever is needed. That night, as the compound settled into peaceful rest, Taesung walked through the grounds with Nari at his side. They passed housing units where formerly broken warriors now slept peacefully. They walked through gardens where humans and aliens worked together to grow food. They stood at the memorial they had built, a simple stone marker remembering all who died in the Zentari War, from all species, with no distinction between sides.